Rain hammered the windshield of an old Honda Civic parked behind a shuttered gas station. Inside, 20-year-old Maya Coleman pulled a thin blanket over her shoulders and watched her breath fog the glass. 3 months ago she had a dorm room, a scholarship, and a mother who called every Sunday. Now she had a car, $42, and a duffel bag of clothes. Her mother's sudden death from a heart attack had unraveled everything. The scholarship required a guardian's signature to continue. The apartment lease was in her mother's name. Within weeks, Maya was out of the dorm, out of the apartment, and out of options. She had tried everything first. She had slept on a friend's couch until the friend's boyfriend complained. She had applied for jobs that wanted experience she didn't have, and for shelters that were already full. She had called 3 cousins she barely knew, and none of them answered a second time. Somewhere along the way, she stopped calling anyone. It was easier to be invisible than to be pitted. At night she parked where the streetlights were broken, because a lit car window drew questions she didn't have answers for. She kept a notebook where she used to write essays for class. Now she used it to track which gas stations let her use the bathroom without buying anything, and which ones didn't. She survived on gas station coffee and the kindness of a diner waitress named Ruth, who slipped her free refills and, sometimes, a plate of eggs she said was returned by mistake. It was Ruth who mentioned the storage auction. "They do it every first Saturday," Ruth said, wiping down the counter. "People stop paying rent on their units, and the storage company auctions off whatever's inside. Sight unseen. Sometimes it's junk. Sometimes folks find real things, furniture, jewelry, tools worth more than what they paid." Maya almost laughed. She had $42, but Ruth pressed a folded 20 into her hand. "Consider it alone. Go look. Sometimes looking costs nothing." The auction was held behind a fenced lot of orange roll-up doors on the edge of town. A dozen people stood in a loose circle, resellers with clipboards, a retired mechanic, a young couple filming for a channel about storage wars. The auctioneer, a heavy-set man named Gary, rattled off unit numbers as workers cut the locks and rolled up the doors just long enough for a 30-second look. "No entering. No touching." Bid on what you could see from the threshold. Unit 114 was mostly furniture, a stained mattress, a broken bookshelf, black trash bags. The resellers barely glanced at it. Someone bid $10. Nobody topped it. Maya almost walked away. Then Gary called the next number, and the door rolled up on Unit 118. Inside, stacked haphazardly, were plastic totes, a rusted bike frame, a faded armchair, and against the back wall, a row of unmarked cardboard boxes, swollen with damp and time. It looked like the contents of someone's entire life, abandoned. "Do I hear $5? Gary said, already sounding bored. The crowd chuckled. Gary shrugged. $5, going once, going twice, sold, to the young lady in the grey jacket. She paid with Ruth's 20 and got $15 back. She stood there holding a receipt for a storage unit she couldn't even lift a couch out of by herself, in a car with no trunk space. But it was hers, and for the first time in weeks, she'd chosen something instead of losing it. A worker named Dale, seeing her stand there with no truck and no help, took pity. "I got a hand truck and 20 minutes before my shift ends," he said. "Let's see what you got." Maya thanked him quietly, embarrassed at how much a stranger's small kindness meant. She had grown used to being overlooked. People saw a girl in a wrinkled jacket standing alone at an auction and assumed she was just curious, not desperate. Dale didn't ask questions. He just started working. The way people do when they've decided helping is simpler than wondering why. They moved fast. The mattress, the bookshelf, trash bags of moldy clothes that went straight into a dumpster. The armchair had mice in the cushions. The bike frame was rust through. It looked, box by box, like Maya had paid $5 for garbage she'd now have to pay to dispose of. Then Dale pulled the last box off the stack, smaller than the others, taped shut with yellowed packing tape, heavier than its size suggested. Written on the side in faded marker, "Dad's desk stuff, do not throw." Maya almost tossed it with the rest. Instead, sitting on the concrete floor of the storage unit with Dale's flashlight app lighting the box, she peeled back the tape. Beneath the watch, folded in a plastic sleeve to keep out moisture, were 3 stock certificates. Old style, ornate, with an engraved eagle and cursive lettering. The company name was one Maya vaguely recognized from a history class, a small tech and instruments manufacturer from the late 1960s that had, decades later, been swallowed by a much larger, now famous electronics conglomerate through a series of mergers. She almost didn't think anything of it. Old paper stock certificates from a defunct company. She assumed they were worthless keepsakes, sentimental junk from whoever EH had been. She kept the watch because it was beautiful, and stuffed the certificates back in their sleeve out of habit more than hope. It was Ruth, 2 nights later, who insisted she ask someone. "My nephew works at a bank downtown. Just show him. What's it cost you?" The nephew, a soft-spoken loan officer named Priya's colleague, looked at the certificates for a long moment before saying words that made Maya's stomach drop. These were never cashed out. When companies get bought out, stockholders are supposed to exchange old certificates for new ones, or cash. If EH never did that, and nobody ever claimed this, these shares would have converted, split, and compounded through every merger since 1971. He made calls. Weeks passed, and Maya lived those weeks in a strange limbo, still sleeping in the Civic some nights because she refused to believe in something until it was real. Ruth kept feeding her at the diner and telling her to stop looking so terrified. "Hope doesn't cost extra either," she'd say, sliding another plate across the counter. Lawyers got involved to establish the legal chain. Maya had legitimately purchased the unit and its contents at a licensed public auction, meaning ownership of unclaimed physical property, including whatever it represented, had transferred to her. The original owner, a former unit renter's late father, had no surviving family who had filed any claim in over a decade. Notices had been mailed, unanswered, to an address that no longer existed. After escrow fees, legal verification, and transfer agent processing, the shares, updated for 5 decades of stock splits, dividend reinvestments, and merger conversions, were confirmed and liquidated. The number that came back left Maya sitting on the hood of her Honda outside the bank, laughing and crying at the same time, unable to speak when Ruth called to ask how it went. $2.3 million after taxes. She paid Ruth back 1,000 times over, literally, insisting on it, though Ruth cried and said the 20 was a gift, not a loan. She found Dale, the storage worker, and made sure he never had to work a shift he didn't want to again. She finished her degree without a single scholarship form. She kept the watch, had the crystal replaced, and wore it every day, not for its value, but as a reminder that on the worst morning of her life, in a fogged-up car behind a gas station, she still had just enough left to say yes when someone offered her a chance to look. Maya never learned who EH was, not really, just an engineer, it turned out, who'd helped design early instrumentation for the company decades ago and been paid partly in stock he never got around to cashing. He'd died, his unit had lapsed, and his life's forgotten paperwork had sat in the dark for years, worth more sealed in a cardboard box than most people earn in a lifetime. She kept one framed photo from the box, a black and white picture of a man in thick glasses standing proudly beside a machine twice his height, on her desk for the rest of her life. Not because she knew him, but because his forgotten patience, and her $5 desperate, had saved them both from being forgotten. Years later, speaking at a small community event for young people facing housing instability, Maya never led with the millions. She led with the rain, the $42, and the 20 Ruth pressed into her palm. "The money didn't save me," she told the room. "A stranger's kindness did." She set up a small fund in her mother's name, quietly, without press releases, that paid emergency rent for students who lost a parent mid-semester, the exact gap that had once swallowed her whole life in a matter of weeks. She never forgot what it felt like to be one signature away from stability and have no one left to sign. The watch still ticked on her wrist the day she signed the papers for the fund. Scratched crystal, gold case. Someone else's 40 years of vision passed quietly into her own. Some inheritances arrive by blood. Hers arrived by $5, a flashlight app, and a box someone had almost thrown away.